If you want access to my entire library of past webinars, as well as access to future ones, head over to daringventuresathome.com or click the link in the description below. When we get to the idea of forgiveness, you may be wondering about the title of this webinar. So I titled it Release and Responsibility. And with those two words, what I'm trying to put before you is what I'm calling the paradox of forgiveness. The paradox of forgiveness. I am a big fan of paradoxes. Okay, let's just talk about that for a minute. I am a big fan of paradoxes. I think that we can't get through life without running into paradoxes. I guess paradoxi, is that the plural? I don't know. Without getting right in our face with paradoxes, we can't get through life without it. But also, once we hit those paradoxes, we have to be able to tolerate them and navigate them without attempting to resolve them or lose one side or the other. So what is a paradox? A paradox is where we've got two things that don't possibly seem like they can coexist, that they can be together, that they can live right next to each other, and yet the reality is they do. So there are a number of paradoxes in life, okay? Forgiveness gets at one of those. Okay. And so the two sides are release and responsibility. Forgiveness is about letting go. I have to be able to let go. I have to release the other person from me believing that it is within me, within my rights, or in my best interest for me to try to exact vengeance. I'm going to get into all that and parse that out in a little bit, right? So I'm going to release you from me trying to make it right through some form of justice toward you, okay? So there's the release side. The responsibility side, and this is where a lot of people have trouble with understanding forgiveness. The responsibility side is that forgiveness doesn't mean I say, it's okay, don't worry about it. That there is a responsibility there, both for the one who did the offending and the one who was offended. There's responsibility. So I've got to hold you accountable. That is actually a part of forgiveness if the relationship is going to be ongoing. We'll get into the particulars of that. That's the paradox that we face. So there's emotional release on the one side. There's ethical responsibility on the other side. Now, if you try to get out of this, what could seem like a bind, this paradox, and you try to get to forgiveness by emphasizing one side or the other to the exclusion of its partner on the other side of the spectrum, you have certain risks that you're encountering. So on the side of emotional release, there is the danger of spiritual bypass. And on the side of ethical responsibility, there's the side of what is called the just world paradigm. So I want to speak to both of those for just a minute. If you err on the side of emotional release, you just want to move past it. I want to let it go. Forget it. Some might say this is sweeping it under the rug. This is forgive and forget, which I hate, and we're going to talk more about later. I don't like tension. I don't like conflict. It makes me uncomfortable. So yeah, I'm just going to forgive you so we can get past it and we don't have to actually deal with it. Okay. All of that runs the risk of what's called spiritual bypass. Now, it could just be just flat out sheer denial of what's happened. And that's its own problem. And denial is a pretty strong word. And I think we all know what it means. I'm not really going to even get into that. The more, I would say, nuanced and more sophisticated version of erring on this side of that paradox by just giving in to the emotional release, I'm just going to forgive you, don't worry about it, I just forgive you, is what we call spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass refers to believing that my higher power, that God, for me, I'm as someone who identifies as a Christian, okay, so God is going to do the work and I don't have to. God can do it, therefore I don't have to. So this might be you come and you tell me today is going to be a hard day because you're about to lay on me that you've betrayed me in some way, admitting to me some form of betrayal. You're telling me that you betrayed me. And I take a deep breath and I say, you know what? God has forgiven me, so I forgive you. And that's that. As we're going to see later, there's another paradox with forgiveness, that it is both a process and a decision. But the belief that it can be a single decision to which I never have to return, which I never have to grapple with, in my book, that is spiritual bypass. If you're not a Christian, even if you don't, find inspiration in the text of the Bible, I think there may still be an important lesson for you in this. So remember when Jesus talks about putting your gifts at the altar, laying your gifts at the altar, and he talks about, there's actually two different passages where he teaches on this. And in one of them, he says, if you have something against someone else, you need to go to that person and you need to basically tell them and strive for reconciliation, strive for it, try to be reconciled first, and then you can go and lay your gift at the altar. Then there's another passage where he says, if you're going to present your gifts at the altar and you remember that someone else has something against you. So here it's not you that's holding the unforgiveness, but someone else isn't forgiving you. Go to that person. Try to make it right before you lay your gift at the altar. And see, what a lot of people think is they think that forgiveness is the act of laying your thing at the altar. Oh, you did this thing to me. I'm just going to put it at the feet of Jesus. Oh, I did this thing to you. Well, I can't control you. I've got to just put it at the feet of Jesus. That's not what Jesus says to do. That's spiritual bypass. The act of worship in those situations is working to make the relationship right again. Now, that always takes two people. Thankfully, Paul in Romans chapter 12 says, live at peace with all people so far as it is possible with you, which implies there, sometimes it's not going to be possible and it's not going to be your fault. It's going to be because there's something going on the other side. And if we've done all we can do, that's all we can do. But let's not get there too soon. Let's not use that as an excuse. But hear me clearly. What I'm trying to get at is the danger of the spiritual bypass of thinking I can just lay it at the altar and not have to do the hard relational work. So that's on one side. That's erring on one side. Erring on the other side is the responsibility side. So here there's no release. I'm not trying for the release thing. Forgiveness comes with responsibility. And that could be you taking responsibility for what you've done, or it could be me taking responsibility for what I've done. You taking responsibility for what you've done, or me taking responsibility for what I've done, but there's no sense of relief, no self-forgiveness, no forgiveness of the other person. And if I fall on that side, now the danger is something called just world paradigm. Okay, the just world paradigm. What is that? Well, that is the belief that things can't be okay until it's all balanced out. I can't move on in right living. I can't move forward in my life until every single wrong is righted, until every wrong is accounted for and made right. That's the just world paradigm. The just world paradigm says for every time X happens, Y response needs to happen as a result. There needs to be balance on the scales. This is tough. This is hard because hear me very clearly. Again, hear my heart in this. Hear me very clearly. I am not saying there's no such thing as scales. What I am saying is that perfect justice, if that is the expectation, if that is what is in your mind as a requirement for forgiveness to happen, you are falling prey to the erroneous just world paradigm. I have to learn how to live in a world of imperfect justice for now. Gratefully, one of the things that I truly actually appreciate about my faith is I do believe every wrong will be righted. That in the end, there will be a cosmic reckoning, okay, a judgment, if you will, and every wrong, I will see that every single wrong will be righted. But that's in the end. That's not in this life today. And so, I can trust in that. That's again from Romans 12, Paul writing and quoting from the Old Testament, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. It's not mine to do it. I've got to trust that, and I've got to learn to live in a world that is currently unjust. And can I move forward? Can I move forward even with the reality of that lack of perfect justice? So those are the dangers that exist on either end. So that's the paradox of forgiveness. So now, notice we haven't actually defined forgiveness yet. Well, I'm going to start by saying what it's not. Forgiveness is not accepting or condoning or excusing or denying what has happened. Forgiveness is also not the same as reconciling. I can forgive someone but not be reconciled to them. Those are two separate things. I think forgiveness is a prerequisite to true reconciliation, but they are not one and the same. So if you're out there and you're the one who did the betraying and your betrayed partner has said to you, I forgive you, but you're like, yeah, but we're not like we were. Yeah, but we're not okay yet. You can't then say, therefore, you haven't really forgiven me. That's not the case, because forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. Forgiveness is also not acting as if it didn't happen. It is not forgive and forget. I don't believe in forgive and forget. I can't make myself forget something, especially something really painful and traumatic. People often say, well, we're supposed to forgive how God forgives us, and that's what he does. Oh, really? I don't think so. I mean, he does talk about forgetting our iniquities as far as the east is from the west, and sending them to the bottom of the sea and that sort of thing. That's very poetic and metaphorical language. He's also talking about forensically, or in terms of our justification. But the Bible also talks about how God disciplines those he loves, how that there could be ongoing consequence for our sins, even those he's forgiven, and the consequences there for our own good, for our own learning, for our own growth, for our own sanctification, if you want to use a good churchy word for it. Not the same. Forgiving and forgetting, not the same. It's not acting like it didn't happen. Forgiveness is a process, not a mere act. Now, it does involve decisions. A decision can be an act, but it is more than a single decision. So it is a process, not an act. It does involve change and transformation. Real forgiveness is going to change me. It's going to transform me and grow me. Piles and piles of research out there show that forgiveness is positively associated with post-traumatic growth. It is often in this process of forgiveness that betrayed partners actually turn that corner and really begin to experientially know and see within themselves that post-traumatic growth. There's also within the research a distinction between what they call decisional forgiveness and emotional forgiveness. Okay. So decisional forgiveness is the decision to forgive. I am choosing in this moment to forgive you. Right now, the pain is so great. I want to hurt you back one way or another, or the pain is so great, I want to call the divorce lawyer right now. I may decide not to do that just because I've got good boundaries with myself, and I've been counseled to, or coached to, hey, don't make any big decisions right now. But it might also be right now, I'm choosing to not extract pain on you out of the pain that you've caused me. That's a moment of decisional forgiveness that cannot encompass the whole process. Emotional forgiveness, this is an important distinction. It's not that the pain of what happened goes away. but my negative feelings toward you are beginning to lessen and subside, right? What you did still hurts me, but my anger toward you is being released. Now, this is so important because you might have an act of decisional forgiveness when your emotions are still very much in a place of angry protection, and maybe rightly so, right? But in this process, as we exercise decisional forgiveness, which again happens over and over and over again, there is a movement toward emotional forgiveness. Why is that important? It's important because lack of emotional forgiveness, if I'm the one who's been betrayed, lack of emotional forgiveness on me puts me in the jail cell, not the other person. It's me carrying around those intense, what we call negative valence emotions, those intensely painful, unpleasant emotions around. And guess what? That is associated with all kinds of health problems and psychological problems and all kinds of stuff. For my sake, I want to move toward emotional forgiveness because I don't want to carry inside of me the anger, the bitterness, the resentment that I have toward you for what you've done. And obviously you can see that's the case even if the relationship doesn't make it, right? You want to move beyond those, not too quickly. You still have to deal with them, right? We're not sweeping anything under the rug here, but that can happen outside of the relationship. Certainly if you're staying in the relationship and you want the marriage or the relationship to be healed, that's an important thing to move toward that. So kind of bringing this together, what is forgiveness? Again, I'm going to read just in case you're audio only here, listening while you drive or walk or whatever. Forgiveness is a multifaceted psychological process that involves the conscious decision to release feelings of resentment, bitterness, or revenge toward an individual or group who has caused harm or wrongdoing. It encompasses both decisional forgiveness, where one intentionally refrains from seeking revenge, and emotional forgiveness, where one promotes the restoration of positive emotions toward the offender, or at least the release of negative emotions. So that's my addition, at least the release of negative emotions, because a lot of the research out there talks about returning to positive emotions. And I'm not sure about that. I'm just being honest with you. I'm not sure a return to positive emotions is necessary. I think it can happen. I've seen it happen. I know it can happen in many cases, but at the very least, a release of negative emotions. So maybe you don't return to the sense of positive emotion you had toward the offender, but at the very least, you're not actively carrying around the experience of live resentment, bitterness, anger, those sorts of things. Lastly, forgiveness does not necessarily mean forgetting or condoning the offense, but represents a healing process that enables the individual to move forward and may foster personal growth, reconciliation, or a restoration of trust.